Welcome to Speak the Truth in Love with Clint Day from St. Simon's Island, Georgia on WCGA 1100 AM, where we do speak the truth in love based on Ephesians 4:15. In today's woke PC culture, there are many forces that want to stop free speech, especially for people of faith. Good men and women must be willing to stand up for their faith and be salt and light to preserve our freedom. True freedom comes from faith in Jesus Christ. In John 8:32, God's word says, the truth will set you free. Today, I'd like to welcome you, friends. I'd like to welcome Steve Stern. Steve, it's great to have you here today.
Thank you very much for having me today, and we appreciate it. And this is a sad day, with Charlie. And actually, I was speaking to John Fredericks on the radio on my phone when that happened. And I don't know if you know, John, he owns 14 radio stations.
Yes, we do.
We're all upset, and this can happen to anybody. It could have happened to Trump when he was out in Pennsylvania. If the gunman was a little bit over to the right or to the left, he wouldn't be here today. So now
That's
it's Charlie.
Exactly right.
I doubt it. Charlie has worked with us on Turning Point, and what we do, we talk about precinct strategy and election integrity. That's our forte. And behind me, you see President Trump. So he's involved with this whole thing, and we're going to tell you how he's involved with us. So what happened was he endorsed our precinct strategy. And we're going to have a precinct strategy Zoom call here on the 30th, which we'll show you the picture of. And that is Dan Schultz and myself. Steve Bannon will come on. So the three of us, about 5 years ago, were talking. And I saw Dan on Steve Bannon's program. Excuse me. And I'm with the Broward Republican Executive Committee down here in Broward County, Florida. And I've been there for 25 years. So I saw him on, excuse me, sorry there, guys. So I saw him on Steve Bannon's program, and I called him up and I said, we have some great experience here, and we have some great success stories. And they were looking for success stories. And I said to him, well, this is what's going on in Broward County. And he said, that's great. Let me speak to Steve and see if he can get you on. So about 4 weeks later, Cameron texted me, his producer, and said, hey, would you like to come on a couple of days later? I said, sure. He said, well, you got to use Skype. I had no idea what Skype was at that time. So I asked my tech guy what Skype is. We registered, got Skype. And I said, yeah, I got Skype now. So he said, okay, we're going to have you on Thursday at 10:15. Well, I had no idea what I was going to say because, this was news to me. And you're going to be in front of 2 million people. Who knows on what how many he has. Plus, he sends it on Getter and he sends it all over the place. So many, many people see it. So I got up at about 3 o'clock in the morning and I'm making notes to myself. And I said to myself, I want to know what I'm going to say because, here I'm in front of it. And that was the first time I was ever on TV, radio or anything because I really hadn't got involved like that. And so 10:15 comes, they Skype me, I get on and I hear in the background what's going on. And Bannon says to me, Steve, you're going to be on in about 15 to a half an hour because we're running a little late today. We had some breaking news, so I apologize. I said, sure, whatever. And half an hour comes and Cameron texts me, said, we're running a little late. We had to put some people on, so we're going to bounce you. Well, anyway, it's 11. The program goes on to 12 Eastern time, and now it's 11:42. And they come on and say, you're on next. Well, at that point, I lost about 5 pounds of sweat because, you're sitting there listening to all the stuff in the background. And I figured, well, they probably wouldn't even put me on. And I forgot everything I was going to say because at that point, like hours later. So anyway, I get on and about 2 or 3 days later, they said, we'll send you a link and you can see what you said, blah, blah, blah. So I listened to it and I did a fairly good job. And about a week later, they texted me and said, hey, we got so many people call because I know, you've been in business at that point 70 years. And he said, you have a lot of experience, talking to customers and talking to people. And we want to have you on again because we think you can sell precinct strategy. So a lot of people say, well, what is precinct strategy? Well, precinct strategy is something that Dan and Steve worked on for 14 years. And if you go to www.precinctstrategy.com and you buy Dan's book, you can see how you can be involved in the Republican Party. And that's what our goal was. And so I said to Steve Bannon, I said, hey, do you think President Trump would endorse it? And he said, well, look, let's try. So he got in touch with Liz Harrington, who at that time was his spokesman. Liz got into a conference about 3 or 4 weeks later and said, I'm going to try to get President Trump to endorse it. Please let me know exactly what Precinct strategy was. So myself and Dan and Steve went over with her. And about a month later, she comes back and said, President Trump is going to endorse Precinct strategy, and he is going to send out a message on Truth Social or wherever it was when he did it. And we have a copy of it. And it was exciting. So we got up every place and started talking about President Trump endorsing it. And what happened was you could see 2 pictures in the background with President Trump. I have a number of them, but we use those 2 because those are the 2 that really state what happened. So if you look what happened back here, this has happened in the arena where the Panthers play, where 17,000 people came. And I was lucky enough to be in a conference with him. And what happened there was I had a candidate run against Debbie Wasserman Schultz, and she paid some money to get in to speak to President Trump. And the person running the whole program asked me to join because I got him about 1,000 people to come. And she said, Steve, on the house, you're coming. Well, what happened that day was we spent 7 hours with different people. We were with the now governor of Alabama. We were with many people, including Trump's son. And each half an hour, we would go with somebody, somebody that was famous, all the way up to the afternoon until 4 o'clock. Well, I was totally exhausted. And
yes, sir.
We were going to go see President Trump. Excuse me. And they had us sit in the arena next to an exit where we were going to go down. So I rested for about 20 minutes. And then they take us into this place with about 30 people, no air. We were dying. The Secret Service made us take out our phones and our pens and everything, and then we got in about 15 minutes later, standing there, we started to go to take pictures of President Trump. So I got up there and you could see the picture. I said, Mr. President, do you know what Precinct strategy was? He said, no, I don't. But he said, we're going to go into a room. We're going to have a conference. We're going to ask everybody different questions for about 5 minutes. So I sat down and he said, could you explain what Precinct strategy was real fast? I did. And he said, Steve, if I knew about Precinct strategy before, I would have won the 2020 election. And I would like you to give your card to 3 of my assistants and make sure you talk to them and get to Mar-a-Lago here in a couple of months to see me because I'd like to discuss this further with you. Well, it didn't happen in a few weeks because, as usual, the assistants could give a cap less. Excuse me. And so I started calling his secretaries and I told them what happened. And they scheduled about 8 months later a meeting which took place over here. But 2 weeks before the meeting that took place there, he canceled. So I figured, well, he probably wasn't going to see me, but he did reschedule 2 weeks later. And the funny part is that particular day was a day we were having a special event for President Trump. So I was going to see him at 4:30. At 6 o'clock, we were having an event. When I say we, Jexit, which is an organization and that handles anti-Semitic stuff, and United West that handles anti-terrorism, were presenting President Trump a big award for what he's done for Israel. And so it was very funny that both of them worked out together. So I get up to him and, I sit down, and this was 2 days before the last election. This happened. So he's sitting talking to his pollsters, asking him, Joe Schro, how's he doing, blah, blah, blah. So it was kind of like a 40-minute conference. My wife was there. He flew Liz Harrington in and my grandson. And, it was kind of hard to talk to him because he was, on the phone a lot. But anyway, I got words in. I said, Mr. President, I'd like you to see if you could talk about precinct strategy when you went to your rallies going forward to the next election. So he didn't say anything, but he started talking about different things. And I said, Mr. President, I got a couple of candidates. Just as a lark, I said, would you endorse them? Well, he said, who are the candidates? One guy was from Vermont and one guy was from New Hampshire. And he called his pollsters and he said, Steve, both of these guys are like down 5 points. I said, but they're both great people. He said, you know what? I'm going to endorse them for you because you're here. I said, wow. Well, here I'm just a guy. So the funny story is he calls the first guy. Guy doesn't answer the phone. And he says, well, leave a message. He told his secretary to leave a message. Well, we'll go around this because I called the guy. His name was Gerald Malloy. He was running for Congress in Vermont. And I said, well, I know you got a message from the president because I was sitting right there. And he said, yeah, this was the next day. I said, well, did you call him back? He said, no, I was waiting for him to call me. I said, what are you, crazy? President calls you, call him back. Well, I was standing there, he called him. He said, president said to him, give me some information. And he actually endorsed him. And the same thing with the fellow in New Hampshire. So that was terrific. And as the conference went on, he asked me a question that kind of changed my life. He knew we did a precinct strategy Zoom meeting, and he said to me, what do you think about the 2024 election? Well, I said, Mr. President, I don't think anything has changed. There's been cheating in the 2020 and 22 elections. I don't think, at that time it was only 20, the 2020 election. I don't think anything has changed. He said, you're 100% right. He said, why don't you add the election integrity into your precinct strategy Zoom? And I said to him, well, look, I don't know much about election integrity other than when I hear. I'm not an expert. So about 5 weeks later goes by, I had called a lot of people and I said to them, who are the most important people on election integrity? And they started making a list, of which I got up to about 100 people. And I called some of them to speak 5 weeks later on an election integrity call and merged it with the precinct strategy. We had about 500 people. Now, what changed all this was about a year, and this is 3 years going that we're running it. And about a year ago, Steve Bannon had me on in the morning, and I did a little different. I'm known for old school, and every time I go up anybody's show, other than radio naturally, I put up a little sign and I put up my number and my name. But here's the problem: you put it up and you take it down. So many people would say, "Hey, I didn't have enough time to see it." So I asked the producer to put my email on the bottom of the screen, and he did. And 1,000 people signed up. And another funny thing happened was Steve Bannon usually gives you 5-6 minutes because, we're not that important. He gave me about 12 minutes and he started talking to me. He said, Steve, you're the hardest working guy I know. I said, no, you are. So we're going back and forth. And I said, well, it doesn't matter who's the hardest worker. We're both working hard. He says, okay, I'm going to do you a favor. I'm going to put this on Getter and I'm going to put this on the War Room for you live. I said, that's fantastic. So
Wow.
The next day, I called the Marine Bannon, his daughter, and I said, well, look, how many people did you get on? He said, we got 60,000 people on the call. I said, that's phenomenal. So as an 83-year-old guy, I think I was 83 at that time, I said to myself, you got to learn something new every day. So what I did was I called my friends again and said, who are the podcasters and who are who should I have this live on? Well, over the year, we got 200 different podcasters. And we've had as many as 8 million people on our calls. And I'm going to tell you about the next call, but I'm going to tell you who is on this thing. So we have Getter, we have X, we have Rumble. Rumble puts us on the front page, Facebook, Cloud Hub, Lindell TV. Then we have our own thing called Stern American. We started Stern American Rumble, which if you go to Stern American Rumble, you can see everything we're doing. All the back ones are on there. We have radio, we have OBBM Network. We have many, many different areas where people are going. Every month we get new people. Now, there's people going out. We have podcasters that go out. And then we got Murray Edwards and people like you that put it on. And then we have very good friends that, do this all the time. So we have a terrific guy, and I'm not sure if he's ever been on, but Sam Anthony from yournews.com. So Sam, a lot of people, I got on Steve Gruber's show, and Steve is grueling me about how do I know you had 8 million people? Well, I said, not only do we have 8 million people, but we probably had more because there's guys like yournews.com, totalnews.com that don't know how many people come on. So we only report what we have that people give us back. So the War Room gets about 60, 70,000 on, sometimes 100. We get on 30 to 40, 50,000. And then all the podcasters, some get 20 people, some get 1,000, some get 1 million, some get 500,000. It depends. And it keeps playing on and on. So that's the way we get this thing. So I said to Steve Gruber, I said, listen, we only report what we get, because if you report false stuff, your reputation goes, and then you no longer are meaningful to anybody. So we have a great election security call coming up this week. And what happened was when President Trump won the election, I got, and this is very important, I got text, emails from people like Susie Wiles, from Wayne Root, from General Flynn, and many, many people saying, what you did helped us win the election. Well, and I asked them the questions. And they said, well, look, each person had kind of different things. But he said, Steve, you've been notified by the Republican Party that you got close to 40,000 poll watchers and poll workers by doing 120 to 300 podcast programs, and that's sensational. Then the other thing is you brought all these people together to learn all these different things about election integrity, because I'm not an expert. I got to bring the experts in. So from time to time, we've had 300 different people talking, many organizations. On the last one, and what we've changed a little bit too, you learn. About 4 months ago, I got the bright idea to have one state as the feature, and then have our regular, people talk. So coming up, we're going to have Rhode Island, and the one we just had 2 weeks ago was Arizona. And on the Arizona one, which I made sure we only do a state if the chairman of the Republican Party comes on. If they don't come on, we don't do the state. And people say, well, why do you do that? I said, well, if the chairman doesn't want to come on, then they're probably not MAGA. They're probably not interested. They could be a Democrat in Republican shoes. So we get the head of the Republican Party on there, because if they come on, they also tell all their sub chairs and people all around to come on, because they're going to speak. Most chairs want to be the one that speaks. Then we had Seth Keshel on, Captain Seth Keshel. He has data that comes on that explains everything to people. Then we had True to Vote, Catherine Engelbrecht. We had General Flynn. General Flynn came up and talked about many things that was going on. We had each time we also have a podcaster. One of my things that I try to do is get people to know each other. So if we bring a podcaster on, there's a good chance that we get new people and they all meet each other. We also, on Wednesdays, Michelle Swinnick and myself, when I can get on, Wednesday at 3:00 Eastern time, we bring podcasters together to introduce them to each other so that they know, and they get each other on shows. Because one of the things that the people said was that President Trump went to the podcasting groups. His son, I think he's 18 now, his youngest son, told him, he told him to get on different shows because we need to get the young people involved. And that's what he did. So we had a lot of people on from Arizona who talked about the fraud and everything else. We had Liz Harris. We had Michelle Swinnick on. We had Greg Dutton on. And then we had some people from California on. So we usually get about 5 people from the state. So my co-host, Raj Diajami from Defend Florida, asked me to do Rhode Island because he is supporting one of the candidates that's running for Congress. There's only 2 that are available to do it. So this one coming up will be Thursday the 18th. Normally we have it on Wednesday, but this time we're having it on Thursday, 2:00 Eastern time. It runs to about 4:30. So who are we going to have on? Mike Lindell. Mike went to see President Trump 2 weeks ago, and a very nice thing happened this morning. I'm sitting having a cup of coffee, and who in the world do you think called me? None other than Tina Peters. Now, she called me from jail, and I was shocked, to hear out of Cleveland. And I want to let everybody know who's listening, tomorrow is her 70th birthday. And she said, Steve, thank you for everything you're doing. We had 2 podcasts putting her in the spotlight, and we had recorded messages from her. Now, people don't know who Tina Peters is, and I want anybody who's listening to please call the governor of Colorado, Jared Polis. Number is 303-866-2471. So let me tell you who she is, who those people that don't know her. Tina Peters was a Colorado person that worked in the elections department. She saw that there was fraud. She tried to save all the data. They told her not to save the data, to destroy it. She refused to do it. She brought in outside people, and they arrested her, and they sentenced her in a mock trial to 9 years in jail. They would not let her out on bail. We have a lot of attorneys working for her, and she's paid over $1 million in legal fees, which is unbelievable. And Mike Lindell went up to see President Trump about this on numerous occasions. We hear all the stuff that he's going to try to get her out. Of course, people say to me, well, how come he doesn't pardon her? Because Colorado was smart. They made it a state felony so that he couldn't do that. But he's working around the clock to do this. And unfortunately, on a press conference last week, I heard him say, and he didn't really know that she was going to be 70. He kept saying she's 71, 72, 73. But she's going to be 70 tomorrow. And I want to wish her a happy birthday on the air. And anybody that wants to donate they can email me at stern1054@gmail.com, and I will be glad to let you know how to do it. Or you can go to Tina Peters' website. Do not do it any other way, because there are other people asking for donations and not sending it on to her. So again, Mike will be on talking about what he spoke about to the president, and I'm going to tell you one of the things he did when I tell you who else is going to be on it. So during our call next week, we'll have Dr. Jerome Corsi, which you may have had on your show, and we will have Peter Tickton, who's one of Tina's lawyers. They will be talking about something that I am working on with them. I'm not the expert on it, but I help them, bring them new people. And they will be talking, and Peter Tickton and Dr. Corsi have already come on and talked about some of this. This is an executive order that they're working on for over 6 months. And what that executive order is going to be: 1 day voting. He'll try to make it a holiday. There'll be no machines, be all ballots, paper ballots. You will have to show an ID, which means you got to re-register. There will be no illegal aliens voting, and numerous other things, such as video of every person that votes. There will be a way. People ask me, it's a big question: what about all the people who are, invalids and who can't vote? They will find a way for them to vote, but there will be no mail-in ballots. So John Goodman, who comes on once in a while, is a close friend of mine. And why I love him, because he went to the library and spent 8 hours reading the Constitution and gave information to Jerome Corsi and to Peter Tickton to give to the president's lawyers, because the left is going to come out against him, but he's going to use probably the Chinese interfering in our election. And I'm not privy to all the information, but we've heard it through the FBI that they have legitimate information that China put in mail-in ballots to do that. And we also talk about the elections that were stolen, such as California and Orange County, where, if you remember the election for Congress, the day of the election, the Republican candidates, 3 of them, were up tens of thousands of votes. A week later, they were up about 5,000 votes, let's say. A week after that, they were tied. A week after that, they lost. Well, how can you get in ballots 3 weeks after? Of course, California is so crooked. So a lot's going to be changed over the next year and a half for the election. The election is coming up, 2026. We're in 2025, and November is going to be the election. Is going to be.
That's right. It's coming fast.
So we have to. One of the big problems is, and we talked about with the Republican Party. As soon as Trump won, everybody thought the whole world was going to change. We don't have to work anymore. We can go to sleep. You know what I mean? And this is a problem, because the Democrats are working around the clock. The Republicans are taking their victory and seeing everything that Trump's doing. But you better get out there and work, because in Precinct strategy, there's 400,000 slots. When we started 5 years ago or 4 years ago, however long it was being on TV, there was 200,000 people involved. Today, there's maybe 210,000 people involved, or maybe just 200. The Republican Party has no clue on how many people they have involved. They don't even know themselves. So there are a lot of organizations that are working like the Republicans to work, because there is fighting in the Republican Party. I get calls from people crying that they were knocked out, et cetera, et cetera. Because remember, we have the MAGA people, we have the administrative people, we have the rhinos, and we got a couple other Democrats who pose as Republicans. So they push a lot of people out, and that's a big problem. So we're working closely on that. So Peter Tickton and Jerome Corsi will be on, and they will be talking about all the stuff that's happening and the fraud and everything else. We will have Alan Myers on from Rhode Island. Alan worked with me 4 years now. And what happened was, he was a Republican that ran for office, I think, like 4 years ago or 3. And every Republican lost in Rhode Island. So he grabbed them all together, and he turned all the town committees. So I want to explain. As a Republican in the Republican Party, there are executive committees, town committees, central committees. You have to look up your state and see what it is. So if you go to precinctstrategy.com, everything that Dan Schultz did tells you, explains to you how you can get involved. Because a lot of people call me and they'll say, well, Steve, how do we get involved? I said, well, didn't you go to Google and look up your local Republican Party? No, we didn't do it. We didn't know how to do that. Well, we explained that to them. And they asked me, well, what do I do when I become a PC, a precinct strategy person? Very simple. You attend meetings, you vote, you get candidates elected, you sign up voters, you canvass neighborhoods, you can be a poll watcher, a poll worker, you can make phone calls. Well, people say, oh, I can't do all that stuff. Well, pick one thing. Do anything. Give me an hour a week. Give me an hour a month. If we got 1 million people give you an hour a month, we're going to get a lot accomplished. So we go on every show we can, and we ask people to get involved, and it's very important. So who else are we going to have on? We're going to have Joe Powers. He's the chairman of the Rhode Island Republican Party. We're going to have Deb Monk on. She's in Florida. She's going to be talking about certain things that happened on the election. I brought her on about 6 months ago to talk about something that nobody talks about, and that is who prints the ballots and where do all the extra ballots go. So she made a whole report on that, and we found out, let's say a company produces 1 million ballots for Arizona, and they only need 900,000. Well, where did the 100,000 ballots go? So she reported all that, and it's in one of our executive things. Then we're going to have Garland Favorito.
So what happened to those 100,000 unused ballots?
Well, do you remember the 3 trucks that were in Wisconsin that they found in the middle of the night? Those extra ballots came from California, were printed with Wisconsin people. They brought them in from California. They stopped them from coming because that's a good question, and I want to tell you something very important. One of the reasons why Trump won, but we lost a lot of seats on that down ballot, is because what the Republican Party did this time, different than the last election, was they hired 6,000 attorneys to fight everything prior to the election. The prior elections were fought, if you remember, after the election. So Giuliani and all these guys who did this stuff, they would find something and they'd bring it to court, and then they'd say, okay, you have no standing and that stuff like that.
Correct.
But the difference was these attorneys did it then. So give you an example, the 3 trucks that came in with ballots in Wisconsin, they were stopped. The attorneys sued them and didn't allow them to come in. Ballots also are, if you remember in Arizona, when the ballots got stuck and they couldn't stick them in the machines,
Correct.
If you recall what happened was Jovan Pullis approved that ballot was a quarter of an inch smaller than the other ballot. So it would jam the machine. And then if you remember, they took all these ballots and they put them into a black bag that nobody ever knew where it went. So Michelle Swinning spent 2 years showing all the proof. If you go to her website, savemyfreedom.us, www.savemyfreedom.us, everything is on there, all the fraud in Arizona. She reports it. There's all kind of videos, and you can see it. But people ask me, well, how come the judges don't give anybody standing, or they don't, get anybody arrested when they know what's going on? Well, it's very simple. Let's say you're a judge. Do you want to be the guy on the left that's saying that the Republicans were right? You would be dead. And that's one of the problems in this country, that all these judges are afraid of their life. And I can understand it. We could just see what happened with Charlie. Charlie went out today and he goes all over the country and he talks the truth, free speech. Well, some idiot, which they caught, didn't like what he said. The left
Right.
used,
and that's, of course, Charlie Kirk, 31
Right.
years old, married with 2 young children.
And, Charlie has worked with us on Turning Point on getting people involved and in the precinct strategy, along with Tyler Boyer. And of course, he has this thing coming up in December, which I was going to go to. But unfortunately, I've got some back problems, going to probably need an operation. So I'm curtailing my traveling. I was invited to the White House in October, and unfortunately, I'll have to wait till after they get the operation. And of course, at 84, you don't want to have an operation. So you have to see him. My cousin's a big neurologist, and I have stenosis, which came from playing tennis for 44 years and having a bad back. So Garland Favorito is going to be on there. He's got some great stuff. We actually taped him because he's going to be out of town during this thing. So he's going to show a lot of good stuff. Wayne Root will be on there. Wayne has a show on Real America Voice. He also has a lot of stuff. He is fantastic. He always talks about what's going on, and we'll have to see him tonight, what he says about happened, because he's right there with President Trump. He's in Nevada. Every time President Trump comes on, he's up on the stage with him. He's been at Mar-a-Lago a lot. And by the way, the picture on my right is upstairs in Mar-a-Lago in President Trump's office. It's just to let everybody know, if you go in the ballroom, you go to the left, you go up some stairs. It's a small office. You would think you have a huge office. And I want to say, a lot of people say, hey, Steve, why do you do this? You're 84. You should be out there playing golf and everything like that. Exactly what happened today. We've got to take out these crazy people, and we've got to get Republicans elected so we win the House. So a nice thing happened to me, and I'm going to show you. If you take a look at this, and for the people that can't, of course, are on the radio, can't see it, but you can see this. You see the little slit on this envelope.
Yes, sir.
So what happened was for my, I believe it was my 81st birthday, I came home on my birthday. My wife opened up this envelope, and you could see the envelope where the little, it's from Mar-a-Lago.
Right.
She read it. And you know how you prayed before and God came down evidently, because when you open this up, the letter that's in it, and I'm going to read the letter, did not get ripped open. So you can see it, but actually on the radio we can't see it. But I want to read this. And it says, Dear Steve, we join your family and friends in wishing you a happy 81st birthday. Our nation is strong because of hardworking patriots like you who believe in and defend the great American ideals of faith, family, community, and country first. Your commitment to excellence and dedication in exemplifying the American dream through ingenuity, hard work, and principled leadership is the foundation of your tremendous success and demonstrate the proud spirit of family-owned and operated business. As you celebrate this special day, we hope your heart is filled with joy, knowing you have experienced our country's greatest blessings, freedom, and the affection of your loved ones. Melania and I send you the very best wishes for your continued happiness and success and health. Happy birthday, and may God bless you and your family. Sincerely, Donald Trump. Of course, at that time, he wasn't the president. I've gotten many notes from him. Here's a little note. I sent him some flag shirts for his birthday. He sent me back a nice message. And he does answer me a lot. And a lot of people say, well, how do you get to the president? Well, just write a letter to the White House, write a letter to Mar-a-Lago. A lot of times he'll answer. So I'm going to stop here a couple of minutes because I'm going to tell you why. I was on Steve Bannon one time, and a lady afterward, I put my number up too, because I'm not afraid to do it. But after today, I'm not even sure we want to do that. But anyway, she calls me and says, Steve, go home and take some oxygen, because when you get on, you talk and you don't breathe. So she says, from now on, when you're on a show, if you see 30 minutes, you stop, let the host talk to you and give you things while you breathe, and you take a glass of water. So I'm going to do that, and I'm going to let you ask a couple of questions or put in some information, and we will continue.
Right. Very good. And you're 100% correct about Charlie Kirk, though. We're all praying for him and his recovery. And Lord willing, we don't really know exactly where he is. So he did not make it. That's what I'm hearing. He did not make it. He's promoted to glory. He knows Jesus Christ is his Lord and Savior. So he's with his Maker now in the running the streets of gold with others that have gone before us. So it's a very sad day for America for free speech, because he was one of the best spokesmen for our country that we've ever had, especially a young man who worked so hard, was so dedicated to the cause, and could answer questions in ways few people can. So our prayers go out to his family. But one thing to shift on this, Steve, I'm really sorry to have to say that here on the air, this tough reality, but you're the COO of the Flag Shirt, the largest provider of patriotic gear in America, host of the Stern American Show on Rumble, veteran and a small business owner for 70 years, co-host of the Flag Day Summit with Jovan Hutton, Pulitzer, and 2023, co-host of the Solution Summit with Jovan Hutton, Pulitzer in 2024, advocate for Precinct strategy founded by Dan Schultz, your election security activist, and co-host of a national election security meeting on Zoom, master network and grassroots and conservative right politics, vice chair of the Broward Republican Executive Committee, Broward County, Florida. And one thing that you are is a great example. You said at 84 years old, you're not giving up. You realize there's still a call in your life. You and I were talking about that earlier. So many of our friends, they get to a certain point, maybe 65, like myself, that range, and then they just want to be done. They want to play golf, whatever, and they don't realize they can literally get involved at the precinct level. If roughly 10 people show up for most precinct vote, you can have a huge impact on the Republican Party. and literally decide who the chairperson of that county is. And people need to get involved. We need good people, good men and women to say, I'm going to take the time and get involved. So I totally agree with you. I mean, at my age, I still go to precinct meetings, and I know that all it leads up to all the the counties and the state, and then ultimately the national politics. And a lot of people don't understand it's a very simple thing to do. It's worth your time. You meet other neighbors, other like-minded people, and we want to encourage people to get involved with the political process. And if they'll be salt and light and get involved, we can literally change this country's direction.
100%. And I got to tell you, anybody who wants to listen and get involved on September the 30th, and people say, well, Steve, how are you doing what you're doing? So this Saturday, we're running an event, which myself and two people actually in my office, we have two studios here. We interview people. I want everybody to go to Stern American on X and follow me, and you'll find all the stuff. So Dan Schultz, myself, Steve Bannon said he was coming on to do a tape. We're going to have one person in every state that will tell you for 5 minutes what's going on in their state in precinct strategy, how to get involved in your state. And that's taken me 3 months to do, to get the people, because there's a lot of people in these states that say they're going to do things, then they don't even return the call. And that's terrible. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So
You're
Dan
right.
and I got to do that. And
let me ask you a question if I can, Steve. I'm going to have several questions if it's okay. One question is, what caused you to want to get more involved?
well, I guess because when I saw Steve Bannon, and Steve, and funny, a lot of people say, well, how did you get on Steve Bannon, which I told you, but how do you get on every time? Well, I text him at 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning when I get up. Who the heck is texting somebody at 5 o'clock in the morning? I know he's up. Actually, when he went to jail, the family had me make a shirt for him, Stand with Bannon. So, and he's a tough guy. He doesn't always give me everything I want. I mean, I'll ask to come on the show and he'll say yes, and then 3 days later he'll say, "Nah, I can't get you on tonight. We're too busy." I'm just an average guy, and I'm not a star. But he recognizes, and sometimes he's so busy. And I got to tell you, that man is like President Trump. He got a mind that's unbelievable. There's not a lot of people like him. I said to him, "Hey, when do you go on vacation?" He says, "Never." He says he never goes anyplace. He's starting to show. And the nice thing, I got a hold of, I don't know if you know who Joe DeBox is. Joe DeBox on this Friday and Saturday. Steve Bannon's flying up there, and he's going to do a show out of there. And we got to know Joe DeBox yesterday. Had a long talk with him. He has a big warehouse in Long Island, and the owner of Real American Voice asked him to host this, and he said, "Steve, I recognize you from your flag shirts." And a little story about the flag shirts, because a lot of people ask me, "Well, how did you get involved in flag shirts, and how did you get involved in this?" Well, when I to tell you how I got in, I started at 12 years old. My father, and you got to have a passion. I mean, I've done a lot of things. I've run cancer fundraisers, Alzheimer fundraisers. I learned a lot from other people. If you don't have a passion for what you're doing, you are not going to make it. It doesn't matter what you do. And I want to talk about a couple of people while we have time who have that passion that I have. And they don't get on TV like I do, but they work 12 hours a day. So one of them is Tina Celine. She's in California. She saw me on Bannon. She called me up and she said, "Steve, can you help turn California red?" I said, "Wait a minute, I'm good, but I'm not even there." I said, "But let's not give up. Let's try. What do you need?" So we got 10,000 people together. I interviewed 50 candidates for them. And people will always say, "Steve, you're doing so many things at one time. How did you accomplish that?" Well, the first thing is I tell everybody when they're driving a car, you better be on the phone, because you're wasting time driving a car and not getting it. So I'm doing two things at once. When I watch the football game, I'm texting people. I get up every morning, 5 o'clock, and I got to spend an hour texting people about our election security thing, precinct strategy, anything, any program I'm on. So I get the podcaster out there, and I post it every place. We post on X, Facebook, everywhere, so that everybody gets to see it. And that's the most important thing, because all we're trying to do is get people involved. We're not trying to make money. Look, it costs me money, but I've been very successful. People ask me, "How did you get involved and what you get involved in?" So I was 18 years old, and I was in Dallas, Texas, and I was at a men's show. My father was in the men's business, and I won't talk about that. But as 18, as I grew up and got into the business and learned, I was standing there at a men's show, and a gentleman who was 80 years old at that time says, "Son, what are you looking at?" I said, "Well, I'm looking at those shirts that you got up on the wall." And he said, "Well, you're a smart guy." I said, "Why?" He said, "Well, I own half of Laguna Beach." And he said, "I
Wow.
sold pennies a shirt called Banded Bottom." I said, "What is a banded bottom?" He said, "Oh, that's those 5 shirts up there." He said, "I sold $10 million a year to them of these type shirts." I said, "Oh, that sounds interesting." He says, "Yeah, and I'm going to make you $1 million." I said, "Well, how are you going to do that?" He said, "Look, I'm 80. I want to go enjoy my life." I said, "I'm no longer shipping pennies. I am now a consultant and tell them what to do, but I don't want to do this anymore." And he said, "I want to get the heck out." He said, "If you go to Penny's, buy these shirts, change the label, show them at one of your shows," because I explained what I did. He said, "You will become a millionaire." So I said, "Well, I'm going to listen to you because you own half of Laguna Beach. You must have made a lot of money." So anyway, I did that. And at one of the shows, 2 guys from Pompano Beach, Florida came in and said, "Hey, those shirts you got up there, just what we're looking for." And they got me involved, and they got me into the Miami buying office. And from that shirt, which is a banded bottom, today we are the biggest provider of banded bottom shirts. Now, I gave most of the business to my son. Now, he doesn't let me talk about banded bottom because it's for the old people. A banded bottom shirt. We've had people call me and said, "Hey, my father passed away and he only wore your shirts. I need a new one to bury him in." So that's how big our shirt is. And what happened was we sold pennies, and I sold them 14 million a year for 44 years. And then they got unsmart. They came to me and said, "Steve, we're going to let you go in 6 months and not use your product anymore. We're going to go young." A guy from Apple and a guy from one of the other big Target or something came and bought a lot of the stock in pennies. And they said, "We're going to take this young." I said, "Guys, I've been working with them for 44 years. I said, you guys have no clue what you're doing." I said, "Think about this. What young person is going to go to Penny's to buy something that is 6 months old?" Because Penny's had so many stores. It's not like a guy who comes up on TikTok and is showing a young men's shirt. You know what I mean? That he can produce
Yes.
today. So they did that, and on top of that, they cut out the promotional ads and they did all this stuff. Well, Penny's pretty much almost went bankrupt. So we went to Sears, and then you know what happened with Sears? They almost went bankrupt, or did go bankrupt, or closed. Then we went to Kohl's. So we kept moving on, and then all of a sudden, everybody's out. And we have our own website called bandedbottom.com, and we're the largest in the world. And then after that went on for a long time, there was a guy in Cincinnati, Ohio, who had these flag shirts. He actually made one shirt, actually the one I'm wearing, and Penny's put him out of business, and he sold his business to me very cheap. And he was making a one flag shirt, and my son started making all these different flag shirts, and we enlarged it. And this happened prior to 9/11. So when 9/11 happened, everybody became patriotic and were buying shirts. And one of the things that I do that other people didn't was when way back then when somebody bought our shirts because we were small, and I would call them up and thank them for the order, and they would say, "Well, nobody ever does that." I said, "Well, that's why I'm still in business." And they said, "Well, you're a smart guy." I said, "You're so smart that I'm going to tell all my friends about you." Well, that's how we expanded. You know what I mean? And of course, today I send an email out to every person, but I don't call them because we've got the time. So you've got most of my story, and I didn't give you a chance to ask some more questions. So we had Tina Celine, who I talked about. I'm going to give you a couple more people before I get up there because it's so important. Chainsaw Sue in Massachusetts, Sue O'Sullivan. She started 52 different town committees. Now, what does it mean to start a town committee? She went into a town. There was no Republican Party organization there, and she got 3 or 4 people together and started that, and then went to the next town and did it. And today she's the chair of chairs. We got a guy, Jeff Davis, in South Carolina. What's so important about him? Every day he sends out a bulletin, and it goes under myscgop.com. We need to get the word out. Then we have Elizabeth Nader in New Jersey. She started a club called Common Sense Club about 4 years ago with about 20 people. There's 150,000 people involved there now. So
Wow.
these are some of the people, and I could go on for an hour telling you all these people that work round the clock that do that. And I try to get them up and talk about them because people don't know who they are. So we can give you somebody in every state to get involved. And, the information I have is unbelievable because I'm doing this every day. So new information comes every day. And I work with the top people. Now, people are going to say, "Hey, does Does Mike Lindell call me? Does Wayne Root call me? They text me, but you got to call them because they don't call you. You've got to knock on doors. You don't give up. You know what I mean? How did I get an invitation to the White House? I call one of my friends up. We do a Flag Day event, which you talked about this year. We did a Flag Day event, and one of our guys actually talked about it from the White House, which was phenomenal. And what we do is we get about 40 speakers every year. We do a different thing. One is the history of the flag. One is all the people that have flags up there. So we try to do a different thing about our flag every year. And people appreciate that somebody's doing this. I mean, think about it. Who brings all these people together for election security thing, precinct strategy, Flag Day? Nobody. You know what I'm saying? So
Yes, sir.
we are trying to get President Trump to come to our precinct strategy Zoom meeting and tape for 5 or 10 minutes something about precinct strategy because he endorsed it. We'll see what happens. Don't know if it's going to happen, but we'll try. So in the remaining time, I know we only got a little bit of time. Give me a couple of questions and I'll try to answer them for you.
Yeah, very good. One of my favorite questions to ask people is, what's a big setback that happened in your life that you're willing to share that helped you become the man you are today?
So I would think that my dad was very tough with me. You know, my markdowns were like 0.00001. Everything I sold was like to the piece. And he would bust my you know what every day. You know, you got to do better. You got to do better. So, you know, I use him because he was a tough guy. When the truck drivers came in 10 minutes late, he used to yell at him. So I would have to stand behind him and make sure and talk to the truck driver. When my dad passed away, every truck driver came and said, "I love your dad," even though he yelled at him and did all this stuff. So when I lost my dad, it was tough for me because he would come in. He had diabetes. He didn't take care of himself. So I would make sure somebody drove him into the office so he felt like he was wanted. Because when you take over the business, your father gives it to you because he can't run it anymore. You don't want to throw him out. You want to come in. The same thing with my son. I let my son run the business, and he talks to me when there's a problem or when he needs money or one of those things. So we let him do what he wants, and that's the whole key. So I have a lot of things that happen in my life, and each thing that happens, you try to learn from. And I guess the worst thing that happened to me in my life was my daughter passed away. When you lose a child, and you would never know that this could happen, and that in itself is so devastating to you that nothing can take it away. Just like Charlie got passed today and his family. I mean, we could all say, everything we want, but there's a man that worked 24/7 for this country and some idiot took his life. And we're so thankful that President Trump didn't lose his life because that bullet could have been right where Charlie's bullet was. That's where he aimed for, the neck. And, I hope they take the video down because we all saw it and he got shot in the carotid artery and
Right.
it just came out. And it's just
That's right.
so horrendous. We're going to listen to every show and they're going to talk about this, and about a month later, they're going to forget about it. You know what I'm saying? But we need to.
Yes, sir.
We need
his
to
life, I believe his life will continue for generations, and I believe yours will too. That's an amazing story. We have about 4 minutes left. Why is it important that the United States of America continue to support Israel?
Well, if we didn't support Israel, the whole section out there would fall apart, and it would be nothing but terrorists. This is where we get all our our information from. Number one, Israel, and I'm Jewish, and every time I try to go to Israel, it was either a war or something. I've never been to Israel, and hopefully before I die, I get to see it.
It's my favorite place in the world. You got to go.
They have technology there that is so unbelievable, and they're in the middle of everybody and this is part of our problem because in New York City, all these anti-Semitic people are voting for this yo-yo that is going to turn New York City into the worst place that we ever had. Can you imagine? I had one of my people in my office today. She's helping me with our event. She just came back from New York. Said didn't even go out at night. She was afraid to go out at night because the police presence is bad. I walked through New York City and I looked 27 different ways because there's no police presence. So anybody could get shot or robbed in New York City in 2 minutes. Because how are you going to stop them? If somebody comes out and robs your wallet or robs you or puts a gun to your head, you can't stop them. You know what I'm saying? So imagine if this guy gets in and takes away the police. He wants to defund the police.
That's right. But
It's
again,
good.
is there a spiritual reason, do you think, to support Israel? I mean, I look at Genesis 12, 1-3, that talks about I'll bless those that bless you and I'll curse those that curse you, and that the whole world will be blessed by Israel. Are you familiar with that scripture?
I'm not. I'm not really a scripture guy. You know what I'm saying?
Yes, sir.
That's
Well, you
one
ought
thing.
to check it out. Genesis 12, 1-3.
Yeah, text
Very
it to me.
powerful.
Text it to me. I
Yeah.
definitely will.
Yes, sir. I will. I
I'm on the
appreciate it.
I'm on the side of Israel where they're so smart and they have such technology. You remember in Lebanon when everybody was holding a phone, almost got blown up. Well,
Yes,
that's
sir.
unbelievable. You know what I mean?
That's
And
right.
um, that's one little country fighting all these other countries. It's been all these years when they're trying to annihilate Israel from all these, from all the years. And there's the problem right now in Israel is that there's so many different sections of the government that they're all fighting each other. It's just like every
Yep.
place else. You know what I mean?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. That's so true. Well, listen, we got to wrap it up now. Thank you, Steve, so much for the opportunity to speak to you. And I want to encourage everyone out there to contact Steve to get involved in the political process, especially on the precinct level. It's actually, like I say, you bring 10 people to a lot of precincts meeting, you'll have the most people at that voting section. And I just want to encourage people to get involved, support Steve, support what he's doing, and get involved with the election process. We need to have election integrity. And again, how would someone contact you again? Tell us
S,
real quick.
Stern1054@gmail.com. Post on Stern American Rumble. Post on Stern American on X. That's what we're keying into. We got 2 assistants that work all the time, checking everything out. We try to answer every phone call, every email. If we see it, we answer it. If we don't
All
see
right,
it,
Steve.
actually.
Well, very good, buddy. Thank you so much. Good day, friends. I want to thank you for joining us today for Speak the Truth in Love with Clint Day on WCGA 1100 AM from St. Simons Island, Georgia. Remember, every day is a God day.